Tutti Frutti, Oda Rudy. Let's go on ahead and let's review Top Secret. So I have Beth here from the Made for TV Movie Podcast. We're going to be reviewing 1984's Top Secret that stars Val Kilmer. And I can't wait to dive into this. I haven't seen this movie before, so she actually introduced me to something new that I haven't seen before. So it's a privilege to be able to review this with Beth. We're not going to go scene by scene. This is just be a fun little movie just to dissect back and forth on how we felt about it. So without further ado, let's go on ahead. Let's get on with the show. I'm excited to have Beth here. So let's do it. And hey, Beth, how you been doing?
I'm great, John. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to be able to have you back on over here. Last time we did this was the Breakfast Club, and we had a good panel going for that. That's just fantastic.
That was fun.
I just want to say it's great to have you back.
Thank you. It's always great to be on the show. Ever since I watched this movie now, though, I've had how silly can you get stuck in my head?
I'll tell you what.
You know which one I'm talking about.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And, we're going to get into that. And I want to give a little bit of a synopsis of what this film's about, too. And then we'll get into the whole entire discussion. But like I said, I'm not going to do a nostalgia factor because I've never seen it before. This is going to, and also, too, it's a parody film. So it's hard to do a scene by scene breakdown when you look at a parody film. All you can do is think about the best moments that made you chuckle and stuff like that. And maybe some things that might have not landed today with some of the puns or whatever. But, it is what it is. My other question is this before we get started. So what have you been up to as far as your podcast goes? How's the podcast going?
So we are in the middle of our third summer of doing TV movies. So as you know, John, I should tell your listeners. So we're the Made for TV Movie Club podcast, and we review and recap TV movies from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So for the last 3 summers, we have been focusing solely on TV movies that are like that were either pilots, reunion movies, or part of somewhere, like in the summertime TV movies of our favorite TV shows. So this summer we're doing our newest one is Project Elf coming out, which was a TV movie that nobody needed, and yet somebody thought they should do it. So it was a really interesting movie. I actually didn't know that I didn't know it existed. And yeah, we had a very interesting discussion, but we're also going to talk about Love Boat 2 this summer, Miami Vice, because that's out on DVD now. Finally, they released it. And Twin Peaks we're doing as well. And the pilot movie for BJ and the Bear, which you probably have never seen, but it was a 1978 to 81 TV show that I loved. I loved it. My dad loved it, so we always watched it.
Okay. Yeah, we have some other stuff going on over here. We are going to be doing a House of the Dragon Season 2 review tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central Time, 9 o'clock Eastern Time for that. We're going to have a panel show for that. We also have some other stuff going on over here, too. But yeah, it's exciting to be able to do this. So let's go on ahead. Let's talk about this. Let's see. So, welcome back, movie lovers, to another exciting episode of Movie Lovers Unite. I'm John, and as always, I'm joined by the incapable host Beth, who visits our show from time to time.
Yes, I love being here.
It's just fantastic to have her here, like I mentioned. And so we've got a special treat for you. We're diving into the zany, hilarious, and utterly unforgettable world of the 1984 cult classic Top Secret. And that's right, directed by the legendary trio Zucker Abrams and Zucker. Top Secret combines the spy genre with slapstick comedy in a way only they can. From Val Kilmer's breakout performance at the rock and roll star Nick Rivers to the endless stream of visual gags and puns, there's just so much to unpack. So grab your popcorn, sit back, and get ready to laugh as we explore the absurdity and genius of Top Secret. Let's get started. So let me give you guys a little bit of a plot line of this. So Nick Rivers is an American rock star, and basically he travels to East Germany to perform at a cultural festival, which secretly serves as the East German government as a diversion for the military operation with the intent of reuniting Germany under their rule. So that's pretty much the synopsis of it. It's a parody film. It's making fun of World War II. It's making fun of Elvis. It's making fun of the Beach Boys. It's making fun of the Blue Lagoon. It's making fun of everything rolled up into one big, huge balloon. Um, I like the whole fact that they're making fun of the Beach Boys at the very beginning of it. Get your 12 gauge out, going surfing, and then you have everybody over there with different guns just going over to the beach and everything, rushing over there. I definitely like the opening scene. I thought it was kind of funny, and you actually sets the tone for what we're getting if you look at the tone of the film.
Truth. And you actually really have to watch this film because there's a lot of visual gags. Because at the very beginning, when he's singing and they're doing their little sort of beachy scene, which was, I don't know, I think Elvis did some stuff like that. There was Gidget, there was the Annette Funicello movies I think they were making fun of. But there's one where, I mean, probably today people will be super offended. Probably a lot of this movie people might be offended today, but it was the 80s. It was a different time. But the scene where she's wearing the bikini and she
Mhm.
lifts herself up and there's like two holes in the beach.
Then there's also the other thing though too, like you mentioned with the whole Elvis thing. It actually makes fun of like Blue Hawaii.
Yeah.
That's the movie I was trying to think of whenever it reminded me of something with those kind of beats. But the thing that made me really laugh was the fact that Bill Kilmer's just this guy who's just traveling to Germany to do a concert. He has no idea what's going on and what's in store for him. But the bit that I really enjoyed was seeing the manager and him together, and
Yeah.
then at the dinner scene, whenever he first sits down and then you meet the love interest of the movie,
Right.
and I just thought that whole entire thing where it's like, well, I can't come in, I'm sick, and it's supposed to be this thing where you're supposed to hear like an overlay of his voice, this monologue,
Mm.
and then and he's on an intercom as he's walking through, reading the dialogue of the letter that Val Kilmer's seeing in front of his face. I laughed my butt off of that scene. I thought scene was really funny. I was not expecting it. But yeah, I thought that scene was funny for me. And also too, the whole entire thing of where the girl's over there, she sees this other spy in the alley, and she goes, "I need this sent in by Tuesday." Next thing you know it, there's a publisher clearance house.
I mean, it's so funny. I mean, and probably people today might not even know what Publishers Clearinghouse is.
No,
But back in the day, so it's really different today, I think, than what it used to be. But
probably
back in
all
the
digitalized.
yeah, because back in the day, you had to send them in. My dad used to do that, and you had to send them in, and they had to be in by a certain date so you could win your prize, which nobody ever won. I don't think. I shouldn't say that because I don't want to get sued. Allegedly, I don't know. People must have won, but I never knew anybody who did. So that was the joke, right? That it had to be there by Tuesday because that was always like the cutoff date for the Publishers Clearinghouse.
Right. And you know what, though? They used to make my parents work their butts off to get that publisher clearance house thing in. I remember there was a bunch of stickers. I didn't
Yeah,
understand a single thing that was going on with publisher clearance house. All I remember was a bunch of stickers comes with this big package that comes in an
on there.
envelope.
Yeah.
Yep. And you have to put it in certain places in order for you to win the money. It was this big deal. And I'm like, and my poor parents are just working their asses off for no reason because
Yeah, my dad would be sitting at the kitchen table smoking, and one hand with a cigarette and the other one with these stickers or stamps or whatever they were. And yeah, it was a whole thing. And then they had to get in by, whatever time at midnight.
But you know what, though? I was thinking as I was watching this, okay, this is actually Val Kilmer's breakthrough role.
Right.
And I can understand why they wanted him as Bruce Wayne for Batman Forever
Mhm.
at this point, because he had little small bits of Bruce I could see of him being all put together. I could see that kind of outlook with him, stuff like that. Him dressed up in a tuxedo. I could just picture this as Bruce Wayne, and this is actually probably why he got casted for that role
Right.
for Batman Forever at that time.
Yeah.
But
I think
yeah,
that people forget that he is also a really talented comedian. And this shows it because he just the way he delivers lines is so serious, but you're like, was that a joke? that was a joke. You know what I mean? I mean,
Right.
it was so funny because you forget that he is really a comedian as well as a serious actor. And that's one of the things I love to watch about this movie every time I see it. It's just like I don't know, because he's just so good at what he does.
Right. He's just so laxed into the character itself to the point where it's like, okay, it's no longer Val Kilmer I'm watching. I'm watching this singer do what
Right.
he does.
And
And
I'm
he just
pretty
transforms into that singer like a
he
snap of
does.
your fingers.
And I'm pretty sure, John, that he sang the music for this. I think I read that when I was like looking up. I don't know if it's on IMDb or somewhere else, but I think he sang everything. And I think there was an album put out of the songs too.
Yeah, the soundtrack is it's actually everything that was in the movie itself, from Tutti
Okay.
Frutti to everything from that, from what I've seen with the research I've done
Yeah.
with it. But also too, the other thing that I thought that was really funny was, you know, do you know German? Yeah, I know a little German. Then all of a sudden you see a
A
little
little
German,
German.
and then even his own, like I said, even the manager, right? He's like, okay, so if this is what the dictator is, I hate to know what's gonna happen. And then he's getting locked up in prison for something, and he winds up, okay, I don't want a single mark on him. I'm like, what? So they punch him all the way up until the point he's back in high school taking a final exam. So
Yeah,
I thought that was
that was
funny.
that was so funny. I mean, there's just this movie is filled with so many funny lines. Even though as I said before, there's a lot of physical humor that you have to see to get to understand, especially like when they're on the train going to East Germany and they're like looking out the window and um but there's so many funny lines in it too. I think the little German was my favorite line in the whole movie, just because you just knew that that was coming.
Exactly. And this is also another thing too, was like they even did Are You Lonesome Tonight,
Yeah.
another song parody that I thought was funny as well. And then you see a little bit of the Elvis flair in that
Yes.
too.
He's got a
You know?
great he can do a great Elvis, and he did. Like, I mean, maybe Nicolas Cage does the best Elvis, but I think that for sure Val Kilmer can hold his own. I think for me, I also loved, maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I just loved the the poking fun at Blue Lagoon was so
Yeah.
funny because my sister and I used to watch that movie. We're like, it's so romantic, you know what I mean? Like people being stuck on an island by themselves, and I don't know. It
And then
was
the
so
rolling,
romanticized. Yeah.
them rolling on the ground, making out, trying to make it looking like they're making out. The other scene, okay, speaking of making out, right? There's this other scene where you see the clothes on the floor, you see the to go boxes on the floor, and and then here's the thing, because it's okay, it happens to everybody. It's okay, it happens to everybody on the first time. You know what? You can always try again. And then then you hear Val Kilmer's character go, I don't think I can. I don't think I can do that. Then you see that she's reading a book to him, and it's
It's just so funny. That was when they were in the bookstore, right? In the Swedish bookstore?
no,
When was
to be
that scene?
no,
I
no,
forgot.
that was like after the bookstore. This is
Oh,
like
that's
when they're
right.
in their little
That's right.
house that they're
Yeah.
in, or the apartment,
Yeah, after
and
they
she's reading to him, and it's the fireplace. Every '80s movie, to me, at least has to have a fireplace and
Right.
someone making love in front of the fireplace.
Right. Yes, just before somebody gets murdered usually, but that's beside the point. No. But I mean, yeah, that was a big joke on 80s films because you're right about the fireplace. Every movie had the fireplace. That was and you know, it's so funny because I hadn't seen this movie for a while, and when it first came out, my we would watch it a lot. It used to be on on HBO or Showtime or whatever back in the day. And I maybe they still do this, but like the cable stations would just rerun the movies over and over
Yep,
and over again. So
they
I
still
saw
do
it.
that.
Yeah, okay. So I saw it like hundreds and hundreds of times. And so it was just so funny to watch it from beginning to end again because I hadn't. And you really don't. I mean, like if you saw the end and then went back to the beginning, it wouldn't really matter too much because it's a parody film, but just it was so funny and I had forgotten. I was thinking to myself, "Oh, is this a period piece? Was this like set in um like the 40s or the 50s or whatever, and then they made a joke about Jimmy Carter, something about Jimmy
Right. They made
Carter.
a reference to Jimmy Carter in
Right,
one
the
of the
Jimmy Carter
scenes.
administration, and I'm like, "Oh, I guess I guess it wasn't a period piece after all." It just felt like it because of the costuming and
Right.
stuff. Because what was her name? Hillary
Yeah.
Flamel she was dressed very 40s-ish in the movie, I felt like. I thought that was
Right.
specific
But if
period.
you speaking of that, okay, so all the Germans are Nazis, right? And
Right.
they're
That too.
parodied.
Yeah.
Well, the Germans in the movie are supposed to be East Germans, but their uniforms are not Nazi era uniforms with the swastikas removed. The DDR East German uniforms did not look closer to the Nazi uniforms than West German uniforms. So there's a touch of truth in television in there.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. That makes sense. It's just so strange because 'cause you're, like, trying to figure out, um, where it's set, like, not where, but when.
Mhm.
And then they make that Jimmy Carter joke, and I'm like, "Well, I mean, it's a parody film, so it can do whatever it wants." I mean, it was
Right,
a funny joke, but I was like, "Oh, okay. It's not." And then they're wearing period piece type clothing, so, um
right. Because I even asked my wife this. I'm like, what is this set in? What are they making references to? Because every parody movie has something to where references something in that era of pulp culture. They also reference, even in war stuff that they're making fun of or whatever. They reference history mixed in with presidential stuff. It's a mixed bag of stuff that parodies mix in, and I'm wondering like, what are they making fun of? What's the pop culture things? Because I wasn't born in '84. I was born a year later. So I was like, okay, so I'm trying to actually piece things together on what
yeah.
they're making fun of. But what if there was like some commercials I did missed out? And then I was thinking to myself when I was seeing the Blue Laguna thing, I was thinking, oh, that must be Gilligan. My wife's like, no, that's Blue Lagoon. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense now.
Yeah, because of the hair, because
Mhm.
Chris Atkins' character had the blonde, super curly, like permy
Right,
hair, and so that's how I remembered it immediately that it was making fun of that. And I mean, so I didn't notice any like super outright making fun of commercials of the 80s. Of course, that was so many years ago, maybe I wouldn't remember them. But I'm sure that there were a lot of. I just picked up for sure on the Blue Lagoon thing because I love that movie so much. I don't know if I ever need to see it again, but
right, I
I
got
don't
you.
remember how it ends. But I mean, but you're right. It was a little bit like disorienting in places because you weren't exactly sure. Because then they're like talking about the resistance, and you're like, the resistance, like, is that something we even say anymore? Like,
Right.
we just
All the
call them war today.
exactly dictators or
Right. And then there's like the
resistance.
colonel and the general and
Exactly. What other moments actually stood out for you though? Like as far as making you chuckle?
oh, I think that well, I totally laughed at the scene where he's um at the restaurant and the band and he's like, "Well, we're going to have this somebody come up who's really special to us." And then Nick Rivers gets up and sings, but they weren't referring to him at all. And then everybody's like, what just happened here?" Because they were trying to, I think, get favor from was it the colonel they wanted to bring up, but somebody was
Yeah.
like in charge that they wanted to like, say, "Oh, he's great." And then Nick came up and was singing. But I also thought it was really funny when he was singing and the by with the jukebox he went, turn the juke and of course everybody can hear him singing over all the and the girls were just like screaming and yelling, and I thought that was really funny too because that was a total parody on any pretty much. I mean, obviously Elvis was probably the specific person they were parodying, but that was pretty much like any 70s too, like, Leif Garrett and Sean Cassidy and
Right.
girls would swoon and fall, pass out, and maybe Rick Springfield, if you're going to compare one to that actual time period, would have
Right.
been. He was
Uh,
probably really big at that point.
my first mind just went to Elvis because I just remember the videos. Like I had like like the concert video from Hawaii when I was little. My
Yeah.
aunt used to play that all the time. So the first thing I thought of was the girls just passing out, going, Elvis, and then passing out and stuff like that whenever he's singing. So my
Yes.
first instinct went to Elvis every single
Yeah.
time. It was just
Well, I think that is I think that is like the norm, but like because I was a teenage girl at the time and I loved Rick Springfield, I was probably thinking more in terms of that, but I'm sure that they meant for it to be more. But also I remember watching like I was not alive, I don't think, when they were making these, but like I said before, like the Annette Funicello films, she made beach movies with and now I don't remember his name, but he was big star in the 50s and 60s. Not anyway. Um, and so that's actually where I went to as well before Elvis, but I I wasn't a huge I, we didn't watch a lot of Elvis movies in our house, so I'm not as
Same.
familiar with them as other things.
Same here. It was just always the live concert thing that my
Yeah.
aunt had on VHS, and that was it. I didn't really grow up with watching a lot of Elvis movies or anything like that. But that's where my mind went first. Is
Yeah.
just the Hawaiian live video when he was in Hawaii.
Yeah, and
Um,
and women did. They screamed and passed out and cried and yeah, I went to a Duran Duran concert and kind of felt the same way.
there you go.
1985, baby.
But another thing that I thought was really funny was when the band manager goes and visits Rick, and he winds up telling him, "Look, I'm gonna try to get you out of here and see what I can do for you." And then you see that Val Kilmer's character winds up having a little toy for him, which happens to be like an anal toy for him to have. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, is he going to work that on his wife or what? And then you find out that once the Germans kidnap Val Kilmer and kidnap Nick, um, then you wind up finding out, oh, he used it on himself.
Elf. Speaking of anal humor, there was the bull, Nigel, and they were sneaking in, and that scene always made me laugh because it was like they had him in the so Nigel and I forget who was in the cow costume with him, and so
See, Nigel and Duquois.
Duquois, is that it? Yeah.
Duquois. Yeah,
Okay,
Duquois.
Duquois. Okay, so they're in this cow costume, and obviously Nigel's in the back, and it's so funny because when they show them, like you see them from behind or like inside, and then when they actually show them in the costume, they show a real cow. I always got such a kick out of that. I don't know why, but then there was a little amorous bull that came along and had some fun with Nigel, who didn't
Yeah.
didn't seem to hate it. Again, today probably wouldn't fly.
No, I could just see people going, okay, cancel culture will be all over it. But at the same time, it worked for that period and I loved it.
Right.
I thought it was funny.
I mean, that's the thing that sometimes we have to remember about movies is that we can't always, I mean, we certainly can judge it from our standpoint today, but we have to understand that the humor was different. It was a little loosier goosey. I mean, obviously there are drawbacks and pluses to that, but I
Mhm.
mean, the movie itself, I mean, it's a pretty smart movie, whether it can be a little bit insulting or not. So sometimes you just have to take that with a grain of salt and just say, you know what,
Exactly.
it just is what it is. It was meant to be funny. They weren't trying to hurt anybody, and then that's just the humor. It just really was the humor of the day.
Right. And also, too, my other favorite part that I liked is the fact that you have a character named Deja Vu, who's supposed to be one of them helping Nick to escape from Germany. He goes,
Mhm.
haven't we met before? And he goes, I don't think so. And my wife just looked at me and she goes, really? That's cheesy. I was like, that's funny. I was like, this is like me doing dad jokes. I
It's
was
true. I mean, that's the kind of silly humor that's in this movie that I think is so smart that like you just like if somebody said, "Beth, you have to write a parody." I'm not sure I would think of some of the things that you
no,
see
because
in this film.
I feel like you have to be quick on your feet on thinking when it comes down to a parody and what fits, what doesn't fit, pop
Right.
culture references, what pop culture reference do I put in there that other people will actually jive with, what's popular today. There's a lot that goes into a parody film to the point where I'm like, I don't think I have the creative mindset to do something like that. But
Right.
for someone like Mel Brooks, who's actually the king of
Right.
parodies,
He's so funny. He was brilliant. Yes, I get it. I mean, and like Zucker and Zucker, they were
Mhm.
really brilliant too in everything they did. So, but I mean, and speaking of like really quick humor and like at the very end when they're like, "Oh, I'll miss you most of all, Scarecrow," which was obviously a nod to the Wizard of Oz, and I
Right.
was like, "Oh, I forgot that was in there because it was so far at the end of the movie that you just." I was like, "Oh, I love that. I love that."
Another thing that I really have to laugh my ass off on is when they're in the bar and Deja Vu and all them are having the conversation, and this girl comes over to Nick, goes, "Hey, are you Nick Reeves?" He goes, "No, no, 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 no. You got the wrong person. You got the wrong person. I'm not. I'm not him." He goes, "Are you sure you look like him?" "No, no, no. I'm not him." And then they're like, and then one, I think it was Nigel that says, "Oh, that was close." He goes, "Yeah, but how do we know if it's really him or not? We just met him today. This might not be who he says he is." So next thing you know it, Nick has to prove to himself that he is who he says he is. And he does this whole entire swing dance thing, and everybody's swinging their girlfriend
Yeah,
and stuff
right
like
on.
that. And I love my favorite war movie is called Swing Kids, which is basically takes place in World War II. They weren't allowed to actually have any kind of swing dancing or anything like that whenever the Germans was around. So they would actually do like classical music, and then they would change it. And then as soon as the Germans seen that they were okay, they're just doing ballroom dancing, so we're just going to leave them be. So therefore, they would go on ahead and do the swinging. I laughed my ass off at that because of the fact that they're just going crazy swinging their girlfriends and they're just going around in circles. I'm actually looking at the background and I'm like, wait, are they just really going bananas and just swirling their girlfriend? I'm like, this is hilarious.
Yes, that was funny. Do you think that that was a nod to that movie, or was that movie did that movie come out after?
That came out a couple of years later,
Okay.
back in the 90s with Christian Bale
Okay.
and stuff
I've
like
never
that.
seen it.
But it's good. I actually watched it in world history class for something. But it just was for me seeing that it just was like a little bit of a callback to what I watched and
Right.
reminded me of that.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it's World War II. It's making fun of that kind of style. So I definitely was eating this up. I'm also a huge history nerd.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. That's why I was like confused, like not confused, but I was like, "Oh, is this set here? Is it set there?" And um I don't know. I just thought it was just so funny and just like or like that song How Silly Can You Get? It's so
yeah,
like stuck in my head, John. Can't get it out, especially because like he did a great job of like Are You Lonesome Tonight? It should have been that should be the one stuck in my head. He's got a great voice though, a
he
singing voice.
definitely did at that time, and it's just a shame now that he
Yeah,
had throat cancer,
right.
and it just sucks,
Yeah, it's really sad.
But just seeing him in that era, in his prime, doing what he was doing, goes from doing this to being in Top Gun, in the same year, I think.
Yeah, really close, either the same year or within a year. But I think because this was like one of his
2
first,
years
it might have
later.
been was it his first leading film?
Yeah, that was his first leading role. He was also a theater he was
Right.
also in the theater. So
Mhm.
that's actually how he got his role for this, because his role in the theater and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna guess he was 20, between 20 and 25, right? He was
He
young in
was
this
young.
film. So he was just starting out. Yeah, and then he moved. I mean, and that's the thing. I think we think of him as Batman and we think of him in Top Gun, obviously, because those
Iceman,
were,
yeah.
yeah, those were like really iconic films. This film did pretty well, I think, and I think people know it, but not like Top Gun and not like
Right.
the Batman film. So,
Right.
but see, no, I love I love that Batman film, but well, we'll have to debate that another night. I was gonna say
Right.
I like Michael Keaton as
Michael
Batman
Keaton
a
will
little bit
always be my Batman.
more. Okay,
I
thank you. I didn't want to
Yeah.
overstep my
No, no, no,
my
no, no.
feeling there.
Even if you did have here's the thing, Beth, and you've seen my post before. Movies are subjective, and it
Right.
doesn't matter or anything like that. But the Batman 1989 was my first movie I ever seen in the theater. So Keaton is
That's
my
awesome.
Batman.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and then of course I watched all the other Batman movies
Yeah.
because I'm a huge Batman nerd.
You kinda have to
But
see them all and compare it. You have to do it. It's a must do. But yeah,
actually
like
I
when
did
we say
that.
yeah, I mean, oh yeah, I'm sure you probably did.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
I always feel
Uh
like my opinion's a little controversial because I know people have other things, but I still love Val Kilmer. I mean, he's just one of my favorites, and it's just because of movies like this that are a little smaller and funny and heartwarming. But I mean, obviously, I like Top Gun because that was a great movie too.
right, 2 years later he comes out with Top Gun. So this little movie just paved the way for him to become the actor that he is today.
Right, right, exactly.
It's just crazy to think a parody film had legs enough to carry him through to show that
Yeah,
he can be a leading man in a movie.
right, right, and
And yeah,
it's interesting that they even like because like today I don't think they really. I mean, I know that they like scary movies there's I think they might still be making, but this was a time where parody films were just huge. You had Airplane, you had Police
mhm,
Academy, Spaceballs was
yep,
came out generally around this time, and so even amongst all of those, this one really um did really well. People went to the theater to see it, you know what I
right.
mean? It was a funny movie.
You see, Spaceballs came out in 87, but you're
Okay.
right about Airplane though too. I don't. Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm
No, no.
being, but Airplane 2 what came out at around the same time as this movie did. And because of Airplane 2 coming out, this movie didn't do well financially. And this movie had an 8.5 to $9 million budget. It only made 20.5 million at that time.
Yeah, at the time.
And then it became a cult classic.
Mhm.
And I bet that 20 point something million, even though it's not globally or worldwide or whatever that I'm looking at, but I'd be surprised if it came to like VHS seal rentals and stuff
Right.
like that.
Right, I'm sure it found a footing because back then, in the early '80s, the you're talking about when you wanted to rent a movie, there weren't a lot of video rental places quite yet. It took a little while for the
Mhm.
bigger places like Blockbuster to come along. Like the first rental place in my town was just like a counter, like a small, maybe 4 foot wide, 6 foot high,
I
five
remember those
shelves,
stores.
right? And I think Top Secret probably did really well in that environment because there just weren't as many tapes being printed yet. Not everything was
I
out on VHS like you have today. The other one I don't know if I mentioned was Police Academy. Now
yeah,
I
you
didn't.
did.
Yeah, okay. I don't know when those, but there were a lot of those. Maybe 7 of them. I don't even know. I didn't love those as much, but I would argue that Top Secret was better than Airplane 2.
That I have to agree with. Airplane 1 is just a classic
Yeah, that one you
altogether,
can't even
and they
that
try to
that's just
repeat
up there.
right. But yeah, you were all right about Police Academy. It came out in '84,
Okay. Okay.
and so that I like the very first Police Academy
Me
movie.
too. But after that
And
I stopped
once
watching
they
them.
started making like 6 of them, I'm like, okay, I watched all 6. Nothing compares to the first formula that you have.
Right. Right. And I would argue that with Airplane because I don't think Airplane 2 was as good of a parody movie as Airplane. And I maybe watched it once or twice. It wasn't like Airplane you just watch over and over. And if it's on and it's one of those shows movies that if you're watching cable or direct TV and you see it on, you don't turn it off. You can't
No,
turn it off. You got to wait for your best jokes to come out.
like Don't Call Me Shirley.
Don't call me Shirley.
I like my coffee just the way I like my men. But yeah, I just feel like Airplane 1 is the best of the parody when it comes down to
Agreed.
the 80s with Airplane 2, no, it does not hit the mark. And yeah, they still make scary movies. I like the first 2 scary movies that
Yeah.
they have out. Anything else after that? No. And then I also like the Lethal Weapon parody films.
Yeah.
Not Lethal Weapon. Naked Gun. I like the
Naked
Naked
Gun.
Gun.
Yeah, those were good. Those were fun. And those
But
were actually pretty consistently funny. Like,
mhm,
that one wasn't like, a lot of times sequels just aren't they're just not the same. And you have to be able to do it in a really smart way. Like you just brought up Lethal Weapon. I think Lethal Weapon
yeah,
2 was
Naked
really
Gun,
good.
yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and like Naked Gun, they were consistently funny movies. Um, and and I wonder, like, were they gonna make a Top Secret 2 at some point, but they couldn't because now Val Kilmer's a huge star and they just couldn't.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that he became a household name, to the point where he became too big.
Right. They couldn't have
Because
afforded
that's
him.
another thing too. Like I was like, well, why don't they make another Superbad, for example?
Right.
And I'm like, at that time, you have to think of it. Emma Stone wasn't a known
Mhm.
actress that she is now. You had Jonah Hill,
Mhm.
who wasn't a household name yet. You
No.
had all these low key actors who hasn't made a household name, just as Val Kilmer didn't have a household name yet to himself
Right.
until this came out.
Yeah, so it makes you wonder, was this going to be franchised and then he just blew up? Because his
That's what
career,
I'm thinking.
I mean, they picked the right person to do the movie, but maybe they picked somebody who was just gonna be too big of a star later on. Or
Exactly.
maybe if it didn't do that well in the theaters, but if it did really well in, rentals, then that would have been enough to make them come back and make more. So it's hard to
Right.
say because they also could have gone on without him possibly.
They
It's
could have
hard to say
done.
how they could have done it, but they probably could have.
I feel like with Top Secret, you can put anyone in that seat besides Kilmer. Because here's the thing, it's about a rock singer, right?
Right.
You can put someone like, for instance, you have a James Bond type. Next thing you know, you have somebody else having like a fish out of water kind of experience where it's just an average Joe being part of the ride.
Right. And at that time, honestly, the Cold War was going on. They could have probably done a kind of a funny spoof on the Cold War. And
Right.
I think that actually would have been hilarious. And then you could have taken another up and comer. Now, at that time, George Clooney, for instance, he wasn't that famous. He
No.
was probably still on the Facts of Life at this point or right around there. So it's possible they could have like put him in there and done something with him there. But I mean, I think they could have made it a franchise, so it is a little surprising they didn't.
Right. But I am happy that they just left it as a one off. It's like, look, it was
Yeah.
fun for its time. We did what we had to do. It was lightning in a bottle.
Yes.
And it should be just left with Val Kilmer at the driver's seat,
Correct.
just doing what he does. I think
Right.
that's actually the perfect way to go about it,
Yeah.
in all honesty, because here's the thing, if you put somebody else, even though it's a different character, they're gonna be like, well, where's Val Kilmer at? That
Right.
movie's not gonna go and that movie's gonna bomb just as bad as the first time.
Or they
Look,
could have figured out a way to have him just do a cameo.
right. But also too, in the 80s, they didn't really do a lot of cameos or anything.
No,
It's
you are
like,
correct. They did not. Comedies on TV did. Like they did a
right.
lot of crossovers, so I guess you consider those cameos. But you're right, in movies they didn't particularly do that.
No, because they were. If you think about it today, and I said this before, they thought of the TV as like a big no-no. We're not going to touch any type of themes within the TV. We're going to let the movies be the movies and TV be the TV, and that's it. We're not playing around with that formula. We're going to
Right.
stick to this. Even actors were like that too. Was like,
Right. They didn't cross
I'm
over.
right. And now look at you have Al Pacino in TV series. You have all that stuff going on. So
Mhm.
it's the same kind of, if you think about it like this, in the same kind of context as this, where it's like, well, we're not going to do cameos because I'm not a if I want to be what I'm paid, what I'm worth. I don't
Right.
want to just show up for 5 seconds and be like, I'm here. I want to be in charge of this movie and take the reins if I have to take the reins.
Right, right.
Right.
Like if you think about it, like so like George Clooney, he was on the TV show called The Facts of Life, which I loved because it was about teenage girls my age. And he moved from TV to being a movie star, but he also was able to move back into being to ER in the 90s because that was when it started to become more acceptable to move between. But you're right,
Right.
like back in the 80s, you were either a soap star, you were a, TV a nighttime TV person, or you were a movie star. That's all you did. You didn't
Yep.
really move around that much. It wasn't really acceptable. And theater people like Jim Parsons, like, the guy who played Doogie Howser, whose name I'm, just off the
I
top
know
of
who
my
you're
head
talking about.
forgetting.
If
He moved he's a huge TV
Neil
star,
Patrick
he's done
Harris.
Neil Patrick Harris. He does, he's been in movies, obviously, he was in Gone Girl, and then he's been on Broadway, I think, recently. He did a
Yep.
revival of Company, and Jim Parsons as well, he's moved on. That didn't happen. The You didn't move in between those genres. And if you think about it, it makes sense that actors do because they're artists. So why wouldn't they move between genres?
Right. I think it's just because of the fact it's like, look, I'm an actor, a
Right.
movie actor. and this is what I'm set out to be. I'm not set out to be a TV actor.
Right.
So they were trying to draw the line between the two, but Clooney managed to do both.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also too, you have to look at the time too.
Mm-hmm.
In the 80s, it wasn't acceptable to be a TV actor and a movie star actor.
Right.
So when ER happens, it's a different shift in direction. It feels more like a cinematic type of show, even though it's on network television. That's actually the closest thing that you can get to The Sopranos if you think about it on the way things were laid out.
Right.
On an ABC network.
ER was a beautiful show. You're right. Every week it was like that. The writing was so good and so tight, and you had to find out what happened. Not just with the people that came into the ER, the people who were hurt and stuff, but with the characters. You fell in love with them, and you wanted to know what happened. And the writing was so good that you tuned in every week. But you're right. It was very cinematic. It was a very novel show at the time.
Right. So it was easier for Clooney to shift from back and forth because of the fact that it felt like a more of a cinematic piece versus just being a network television drama show.
Yeah.
And he felt like it was like a big budget.
Right. And he might have been one of the first actors to do that, like in that time period. You know what I mean? But it was like amazing. It's like George Clooney's going to be on the show, and everybody tuned in. And then I don't know, that show was on long after he left, and people were still tuning in for 10 years or longer. It was a good show. I watched it for a long time.
But yeah, as far as this goes, I
think I forgot we were talking about Top Secret.
Hey, it's perfectly fine. I'm enjoying the conversation, but it reflects back over to Top Secret, though.
Right.
I mean, it's not like we're going off topic on purpose or anything like that. It's the whole fact of the comparison between the two at the time, from 84 to being in the 90s, on how things have shifted and changed. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we're not going off topic. I feel like that we're still going very much on topic.
Yeah, I think it's an important conversation to have.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. I think it's a great conversation to have. Then I like how Connell also says he won't break. You tried everything. Do you want me to bring out the Lee Ray Neiman paintings? No, we cannot risk violating the Geneva Convention.
Oh, that was so funny. And then like when Nick goes to jail or whatever they called it, and then he finds Dr. Flamand, who's being forced.
The way he finds him though is hilarious though too, because he's thinking he can try and escape prison, so he gets the wrench, takes the wrench up. Next thing you know, he goes into the duct, and then he slides back down to the bottom part of the duct. Then he goes over to the other side of the room, and he's actually with a little barricade underneath the floor is. Then he pops his head up where the toilet is. So it's classic 80s trope of just being in this one room scenario and him just popping up all over the place, but where he's supposed to be at, which is outside.
Yeah.
And
that was funny.
And he sees the doctor, and I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that was really funny. And the doctor is being forced to create, I forgot what he's being forced to create, a device that can destroy some submarine fleet, NATO's submarine.
Yes, I think it was like NATO or
something like that. It was all very confusing, and then at some point you just have to be like, you know what, you can't keep track of every single detail in this movie. You just have to let it go and just enjoy it. So then oh, now I'm like lost my train of thought, John.
But yeah, you said that you just have to let go of of everything and just enjoy the film for what it is.
Yes, and that's the best part of the film, is just letting go. But so like some of those little details where they're like talking about like this, forcing him to create this thing in this one room, of course, with like no tools to like, like destroy this NATO submarine fleet or whatever it was. It's like, okay, I just can't keep track of every little detail like that.
Right. And then Nick goes on ahead and pushes a button, accidentally takes the submarine or the ship and crashes into something, and all of a sudden you see the captain in the background just pop up while all the other Germans are over there aiming their guns at Nick and the doctor. But another thing that was funny was the whole parachute scene too, because this is where Hillary tells her, look, I love my boyfriend. I would never let him go.
That's how they're coming down. Like they're just having And they're not like, yeah, it's really funny. I can't let him go, and
And
you don't love him, and you should stay with me. And
yeah, but I love him. And then all of a sudden she turns around, she goes, but I just want him to do well for his research. And that's it. That's all she wants him for. And then also too, whenever she's having the conversation and you see Nick going down a little bit, just wait, I need to tell you something. He goes back up.
he pops back up. And then like at the end of the movie when they're kissing, did you notice that they're like,
yeah, like
they take their tongue and move it around? That was one moment that I still remember to this day. And so the whole time I was rewatching the movie, I'm like, what is that scene? And then I forgot it was like at the pretty much very end. That also might have been one of the first movies, John, that had like the after like had a scene during the credits. That was not common
right.
either.
To be honest with you, Ferris Bueller had that as well.
Yep. But that was not till 86 or 87.
Right, 86. So yeah, I think this might be the first one to actually have a post-credit scene.
It might not be the absolute first, but it was definitely pretty novel at the time. I don't think it was not common, at least not yet.
No, not yet or anything.
Yeah.
But I do want to mention, you want to know what year the very first parody film came out at?
Yeah. Now let me guess. I'm going to guess 1970.
Nope. 1901.
What? What was it called?
I think it was one of those railroad movies.
Oh.
You know what I'm talking about?
They kind of all were back then.
Right?
I think they had one scene and it was like one set and it was a railroad, right?
Right, exactly. That's all it was. It was just a railroad.
I wonder if
it's called The Little Train Robbery, 1905.
Oh, who starred in it? Did we know
I have
any
no idea.
names? No. I wonder
It was a 12-minute Western spoof.
I wonder if that movie still exists.
That'd be hilarious if it was. If it did.
Yeah. Because I have a cousin who has tried to watch every single Oscar winning movie, but there are movies that just didn't save, or they didn't were not preserved well enough. So she's had a very difficult time because some of them only exist in partial form or not at all. If you can believe that. I know, isn't that crazy to think about? I'm like, really? But I mean, that's just what happens. I mean, time.
Exactly. And no one thinks that they're going to go back and revisit some of these Oscar winning movies or anything like that, or nominated films.
Especially very early on. Like when was the first Oscar? Do you remember what year it was?
I don't know.
40 something? Because if it was in the 40s also, things just weren't made as well because they didn't have the resources during the
1929.
war. Okay, see? Like during World War II, they just didn't have the resources that they had during other times, right? So things like, for instance, books that have lasted from during World War II that were printed are worth a lot of money because they didn't last. They were not made to last because they didn't have the resources to make really good paper.
Exactly. And also even if you had like hardcover book, for example, the bindings would actually be a lot looser, and it was very publishing on it I'm trying to think of the word I'm trying to think of. It wasn't very thorough when it comes down to that.
Yes.
And trying to publish something like that.
Yeah. So I think that's partly the struggle with that. That's why I'd be interested. I'm going to look that up and see if I can find it somewhere. Maybe somebody digitized it somehow or other.
All right. Well, let me talk about, okay, so I'm just going to do this real quick. So Rotten Tomatoes is at 76%, and then you also have the audience score at 80%. So audiences loved it. Critics are mixed between the two. Then IMDb, I think, was like a 7.5.
Yeah, that's kind of low, huh?
7.5 is like medium, in my opinion. If it's like 7 out of 10 or something like that, or 7.5, I would say is like a medium, where like people liked it.
Average.
In a sense.
Yeah,
it's like average.
I think part of that is the way we watch movies today is so different, and the content of movies. I think that might be it. I think there probably were some things that people didn't love about the movie, although there wasn't anything outright. It wasn't even an outright misogynistic film necessarily, except for some of the boob jokes. But I mean, there was plenty of jokes for the men too. So they did even it out.
Let's see. But I just want to go on ahead and see what some of the critics said, and then after that, we'll wrap this up a little bit. So basically, you wind up having someone said spoof movie done right.
Mm-hmm.
21 people found that helpful, which is actually good because it was a good movie.
I agree with that.
Then for now, let's go on ahead and go into these Rotten Tomatoes stuff though, which I thought is really good. So 51 reviews for this. Definitely silly spoof that is blessedly under no illusions as to what we want from a movie like this. That's what one person says, which I disagree. Along with this, Jen and Pitch Perfect singing, which covers a range of musical genres. This was the moment that we saw a movie A Star is Born. Although there is no question that this is a free swinging spoof, runs out of steam. It is wonderfully flaky example of that Hollywood has offered traditionally silly summer season. So that's what the critics had to say, which I strongly disagree with that because some
Yeah.
people just don't understand what a spoof movie is and what it's supposed to do.
I don't think it ran out of steam at all. I think it
No.
was just as funny at the beginning as it was at the end. And it wasn't a long movie. What was it, an hour and a half? Maybe 140?
Yeah, which is perfect.
Yeah,
If this
that's
was
all
filmed
you
today, it
want.
would be a 2-hour movie.
No, it would be but that would be too long.
Yeah. Let's see here. Now these are the positive reviews.
Okay.
So this is a madcap, zany type of comedy film. It features visual slapstick comedy, quite reminiscent of Naked Gun films. It is certainly a parody film, a spy parody that also reminded me of a film Airplane, as well as the Top Shot and Scary Movie films due to another saucy reference in the like. It's not generally explicit, but there are some relatively strong references made with sexual content on occasion. But like Elvis, watching the Germans react to this intro performance was quite amusing in a silly way. So this person really liked it. So
Yeah.
there you go.
I think silly is a good word.
Yes.
Because it is. It's silly. It's silly. And that's what you have to take from it. It's silly. And if you just come at it with that mindset, you're gonna laugh a lot.
Right. And especially if you know go into the mindset of this is a parody film. This is not um made to be serious or anything like that. You're supposed to laugh your ass off, and you got a good 90-minute film to do that and make you feel good and walk out of the theater feeling like that you spent your hard-earned money just laughing.
Right. I mean, and it's really clear right at the very first scene when they all have the guns and stuff that this is a parody. That it's very clear. So if you couldn't pick that up, then maybe you need to not watch that one.
Exactly.
But
Maybe
if you
this
want to
movie is
laugh,
not for you.
right. But if you want to laugh and just let everything else go, then you'll be fine. Because I think it's a good movie. I think it held up too. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I think it held up really well.
I think so
But
too. I think
I love Val Kilmer, so
I do too. So, with that being said, that's going to be it as far as this review goes. I hope that you guys enjoy this review. Go ahead, follow Beth at Made from TV Movie Podcast Club. I'll let you go ahead and do your stuff that you need.
that we are the Made for TV Movie Club podcast. All you have to do is give us a Goog and you'll find us, and we're on all of the podcast apps, and we put out a new episode every other week. So, and we've been very consistent with that. We are going to hit 100 this year, 100 episodes.
Awesome. Congratulations to you. It's hard to believe that you guys are crossing that 100 mark.
I know. We're trying to figure out something fun to do, but we haven't quite decided yet if we want to do like a really bad movie or a really good one. So we have to decide.
I can't wait to hear what you guys have picked out to do. It's
Yeah,
great.
We're still deliberating.
But guys, if you were wondering where you guys can watch this at, you can watch it on Netflix right now until the end of the month. And after the end of the month, I don't know where it's going to go, but this is actually where it's at right now. So go on ahead, check out Top Secret, where you guys get your streaming services from for Netflix. Also, 8 o'clock time, 9 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow night, we're going to be doing our House of the Dragon Season 2 review for Episode 1. Then on Friday, I'm going to be doing another movie review of a movie called Hitman. It's actually on Netflix right now. And I'm going to have the Pick the Flick podcast with me for that one. So that's going to be once again 8 o'clock Central Time, 9 o'clock Eastern Time for that. On Thursday, I actually have the opportunity to interview an actor, and his name is Alan C. King Bell, and he played a little short role in the Walker Texas Chainsaw, Walker Texas Ranger.
Hey, that would be a great parody.
You see, this is Val Kilmer has done this to me, right? This is Val Kilmer's fault. But I'm going to be interviewing him because he was actually in the Walker Texas Ranger TV series that got rebooted. That was part of Chuck Norris. I'm going to be interviewing him for that. But also, too, he was also one of those UFC fighters that won a slap competition in the UFC. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to talk about a mixed bag of different things over here at Movie Lovers Unite. So go ahead and check that out on Thursday night, 8 o'clock Central Time, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. And that's going to be it as far as this review goes. And we're going to be out in a few minutes. Thank you so much, Beth, as always. I'm happy to have you here. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And always, until next time, guys, bye-bye.